welcome to episode number 221 of the ETPHD Team Podcast with myself and Georgia. Hi, Georgia. How are you?
Hello, I am very good, thank you. How are you?
Good. I am fine, thank you. Anna, how are you?
I'm good. That fine was real convincing.
It was the pause. It was
yeah, well, we don't like to just say we don't just like to say good when we don't feel good. I don't feel good today, so I am fine. This is obviously so we're recording this podcast a bit early because I am going on holiday selfishly next week, and so this is like 6 days early, this podcast. And I this morning tried to go to the gym, got halfway, started crying, turned around, went to Sainsbury's, bought ice cream and grapes and good real tissues, I was just saying, that which are just a wee treat for my nose, and then came home. So that's been my morning. It's very unsuccessful so far, but that's okay. It's all fine. Everything is fine.
I would say a morning with ice cream is never unsuccessful.
I haven't actually eaten it yet. It's in the freezer for later. I'm not on the 11 a.m. ice cream. It's not, times are not that bad, but you never know.
What flavour did you get?
Like a salted caramel one, because I can't really taste very much at the moment. So I went I feel like salt and sweet. Surely one of them will touch the sides and I'll be able to taste that. Be upset if I can't.
I hope you can.
Thanks so much. Okay, let's get cracking on the questions. Georgia, do you want to go first?
I would love to. So this is one of Becca's clients' questions. How do alternative sports like bouldering fit into the recommendations for lifting? I typically do one strength session outside of climbing gym per week, but some weeks this may only be Pilates, while other weeks it involves weights.
Oh. That's a great question.
I mean, I think it depends on what your overall goals are in terms of fitness as to the kind of variety that you want to include. Because if your only goal is powerlifting, then obviously powerlifting more regularly is going to be really helpful. But it's activity overall that is building general health and general fitness, and things like bouldering, my goodness, there's strength, there's endurance, there's definitely cardio. I have certainly sweated an incredible amount in the times when I've been doing climbing. And I think strength training is really important, but also thinking about strength training doesn't necessarily have to be gym based and lifting so much weight for so many reps. If you are involving a variety of activities and you enjoy it and you feel fit and healthy and strong, yeah, I would go with that. If you're doing 1 to 2 strength sessions a week, you're going to be maintaining and or building strength within that.
Yeah, totally agree. Do you know, fun fact, my PhD was, the first study that I published for my PhD was in rock climbers. And I don't know how I fell into this hole, but it looked at the vascular characteristics of people who climb and how advanced their vasculature is, and it's wild. Because of the constant what we call reactive hyperemia, which is basically you get this with isometric lifts, right, where you get, if you're holding on to something and then you let it go, you get a sudden rush of blood to that area, which is reactive hyperemia. And because of that rush of blood, we get things like an increase in nitric oxide, other things that cause dilation of our blood vessels, and over time it causes our blood vessels to adapt and get bigger and healthier. So if you're doing bouldering regularly, you've probably got great vasculature in your arms, so that's excellent for your health. And who would have ever thought that I would get that study into my work these days? Not me. But here we are. So thank you so much, whoever asked that question. I feel like now my whole PhD was worth it, so thanks. Okay, Anna, question.
Is there a way to be more mindful, or do you have any tips if you're drunk / under the influence and around food?
What was the first part of that question? Sorry.
Do you have any tips on how to be mindful if you've had some drinks?
Oh, I honestly think it comes from being more mindful day to day, that it becomes more of a practice. Because realistically, like anything, right, you drunk text your ex when you're drunk, because day to day you're thinking about drunk texting your ex, so it just becomes natural when you have 2 drinks to think, oh, this is a good idea. Whereas day to day, if you're really like actively not thinking about your ex and, you know, working on healthier relationships, you're far less likely to do it. And the same sort of thing goes with mindful eating. If you're constantly, like, if it's becoming, you're building a habit, so it's the easiest pathway for your brain, that becomes natural when you've had a few drinks, it's less likely to just be wiped off the table. So I think a lot of it comes with time and acceptance that mindfulness does drop a bit when you've had alcohol, and that's something that you can't really change. But then maybe just having like one thing that you commit to before you've had a glass of wine or whatever. You say, okay, well, to be more mindful tonight, I'm just going to, like, before I eat, I'm just going to make sure that I take a couple of breaths, and keep reminding yourself of that, like, before you have a drink. That could potentially be helpful. And also, of course, just not drinking too much, and, you know, committing to having a drink and then a glass of water and then drinking in a glass of water, or something that actively will slow you down. Because realistically, a few glasses of wine or alcohol, like, is fine, but that does also impact like your hunger levels, which is going to make you more likely to mindlessly eat because you're hungrier because of the alcohol intake. So also making sure that you're going to these things, like events and stuff, where you're not super hungry, which is impossible if you've been dancing all night and then it's 2 o'clock in the morning, obviously, in which case you probably need chips and cheese, and that's okay. But like, just making sure that you're not starving before these things is helpful.
I think the only other thing I would add to that is, if it's, I'm not quite sure on the context, if it's a case of coming home and then kind of face planting all the food, or kind of getting takeaway because you, like you said, you're feeling really ravenous, something that my clients will kind of do, if they're being mindful of their overall energy intake or eating for like healthful nutrition at that point, is to plan in advance foods that they might have when they come home, and making sure they've got something in that isn't going to potentially set the house on fire, but, you know, some snacks that are going to kind of take the edge off that hunger, that they have kind of planned in advance. They know it's there for them, so that if they are walking home past like kebab shops or kind of like takeaways, the temptation isn't sort of like, oh, I'm just gonna kind of go all in and binge eat everything. It's like, okay, actually, I know when I get home I've got this and I do really like it, and that can just help as well. So you're almost kind of like planning in advance for your less mindful self.
Agree. I used to do that with cereal. I'd always have really good cereal, like granola or something, from when I got home. That used to, I mean, I was very rarely lured away from chips and chips, but when I was, it's because I had like good cereal. Okay. Denai's client, what do you do when you miss your period due to stress?
Look at what you can do to help manage that. No. Like, I think I've had that conversation with you, Emilia, when I was like, oh, there has been like one missed cycle, and I was like, right, that's yeah, I've let certain things go. It's time to really kind of hone in and be really intentional on managing stress levels. I knew at that point my nutrition was fine. I knew that my exercise was fine. But looking in, have any kind of habit slip that are going to support stress management? Has it just been a really busy kind of working life period, and you go, right, okay, I need to be really intentional with planning in rest, whatever that looks like for you. Just having a bit of a recess, and seeing what you might need to implement to help through that time. And I know it sounds really unhelpful to say try not to worry too much, because these months can happen, but the fact that you've caught it just means you can work through it.
Agreed. I think the only thing I'd add really is, if this is something that's happened maybe once or twice, it's useful to track your cycle and start to notice, like, check in, for example, what your luteal phase is doing. And that short luteal phases are often a sign that things are starting to become irregular. And so maybe this has actually been things, you've had that sign for a while, that little red flag to say things are maybe not quite right, but you've maybe not noticed because you've not been tracking your cycle, in which case, like, again, I mean, the answer is still the same in managing your chronic stress, but it's easy when it's just one period to kind of think, well, it's just this acute stress because I've, you know, got deadlines this month. But actually, just because this month is the month that you didn't have your period, it might be that other months you still have, there's still something not quite right. So you need to manage that stress. And like you said, Anna, making sure that you are checking in on your nutrition and things and training is super important. I think often when we think of hypothalamic amenorrhea, we think of restriction and control, right? Because it's usually a low energy availability. But something that we don't talk about much is the hypothalamic amenorrhea that can come with potentially binge eating and binge eating disorder because of the chronic stress that you're under as a result of that, and potentially one of the reasons why you experience that, like that kind of constant cycle. So you're working with Deny, so you will be working on your relationship with food anyway. So just being mindful of that. I'm very much struggling to get my breath today, right? So when you're talking, normally when we're doing this podcast, right, so obviously you won't know if you don't do the podcast, but you can tell when someone else is about to speak. So like you kind of hold back or you go ahead. But I'm really aware that I'm sitting with my mouth open. I'm like, it looks like I'm just like waiting to interrupt you at any moment. I'm not trying to interrupt anyone. I'm just going to breathe properly.
Just try to breathe.
Yeah, I'm trying to do it really like eloquently, so my mouth is open and I've got a wee smile on my face. It just makes me look creepy every time I look at myself. I'm like, what's wrong with you?
We can have a signal, like when you think you finish, you can do a nod, like a over to you.
Maybe we need to get paddles or something. Okay, Anna's question, I think. George.
Yeah, next one from Becca's client again. Becca's clients are on fire right now. I can see a few from them. I've just started dating again, and I don't have much confidence in my body. Any tips for this?
I don't think dating confidence comes so much from your body, although you think that it does. Realistically, I think we overestimate the impact of like our body fat on our relationship status and our dating abilities, and that's kind of a manifestation of diet culture, really, is that our worth is in our bodies. I actually did a talk for Darren and his clients last night on diet culture and how we very much have been taught that our bodies are the most interesting thing about us. So when it comes to dating and building connection, we think, okay, well, the body's the most important thing, when realistically, like, I'm not denying the impact of like aesthetic attraction for sure, but we overestimate that in the sense of people see a body, they don't see 5 kilos here and there, they don't notice these changes that you notice in your body beyond like a basic physical attraction that, like, of course most people have a basic physical attraction and preferences and stuff like that, and that's obviously totally fine, but it's not to the extreme that you often think that it is. I honestly think with dating confidence, it's about thinking, like, how do I want to show up, and like, what is my intention with this, and wearing clothes that feel comfortable to you, and really getting yourself in a position of like, this is how I want this is what I want my energy to be like. And I was speaking to someone recently, because before I do events now, I will often listen to my therapist ghosted me before I go and do a talk or an event. And it's like, why would you listen to that? Like, it's not calming, it's not soothing. But for me, it's like, it reminds me of my personality. It reminds me that I love to laugh. It reminds me that I am quite funny sometimes. I mean, I'm obviously not on the podcast, but like when I'm laughing, I'm like, oh, I am. Like, I do have a sense of humor. So when I go and do a talk, it sets me up to be, this is how I want to show up. I want to be funny. I want to be educational, right? But I want to be funny because that's life goals, right? But it sets my energy up. So I think it's more about like maybe having a little bit of a pre-date routine. Maybe you might have a glass of wine and you might like have a favorite show or a favorite podcast or something that like revs you up. And of course, like, clothing and stuff is important in terms of how you feel. But then I think the other thing with dating too is a big shift for me that helped was, it's not a job interview. You're not going to impress this person. You're there to see if you want them as much as if they want to date you again. and take the pressure off yourself, because you might go on this date and think, I don't want to be with this person. But especially if you've got like a attachment struggles, which so many people do, often you can just fall into this narrative of like, I just need everyone to like me, and if they don't like me, there's a problem. Even if I don't like them, if they don't like me, then there's something wrong with me and there's an issue here. And it's like you take all the onus on like agency away from yourself and you put it onto someone else, and it's like, no, like, you're going on this date because to see if you have a good time. That's all it is. It's not a job interview.
I like that. I'm not here really for dating advice. I have to be really honest. I'm a poor candidate to offer advice. But just to build a little bit on something that you said as well, Emilia, like around what people notice in other people's bodies. In the research in the course that Jake does on break binge eating, there is this, like, it's a phenomenon called like the just noticeable difference. And for somebody to notice a difference in someone else's body, it has to be something like 4 to 5 kilos. So people won't notice if you've lost weight or gained weight until it's like 4 or 5 kilos, which is a moderate change in the body, really. But sometimes when we think about like our bodies, it's like, you know, 1 pound or 2 pounds, and we think, well, everyone's going to notice that something has changed. And actually it's not noticeable until it's a much bigger change. And even then it's only just a noticeable difference, like barely kind of something that people can see in you. But I like the point you made around like, do I like them? That's something that one of my clients, she finished coaching with me a couple of weeks ago, and in her feedback she was kind of like, one of the biggest things I'm taking away when I go on dates now is like, it's not about like, will they like me and what do they think of me? It's I'm kind of interviewing them, like, I'm amazing, are you good enough for me? Like, what do I like about you that isn't about the way that you look? Like, and can I actually see myself spending time with you, rather than worrying like, what should I wear? She's like, I wonder what he's bringing to this date. Like, and I like that.
I love that. What a legend. It's a good place to be. I think I sometimes dip in and out of that. Sometimes I'm like, yeah, like, you're lucky if you're dating me. And then other moments, like, well, everyone's human, right? Other times I'm like, oh, I've got quite a lot of wrinkles. And then I'm like, no, come on, you're lucky if you're dating me. But yeah, I love that. Okay, Anna.
When you feel like you'll finally have a good relationship with food, do you think there is ever a time when you should actually go for the more nutritious option and say no to the slightly less healthy options? So you fancy some chocolate, but you've had some every night and maybe it's a habit, or you're not that bothered, so you could have a protein bar or some yogurt, etc.
Yeah. Yeah, because a good relationship with food is honouring your health. And so honouring your health is going to not be probably having chocolate all the time and having some yogurt or an alternative sometimes. So for sure.
I think it's one of those things, like, people, when you start doing this work, obviously in that first stage of unconditional permission to eat, when you are allowing yourself those things more often, say chocolate for example, it's hard to see a time when you don't, like, even though you know that you're doing it for a reason, it's hard to see a point where things do feel more balanced and you're not always going to go for that option. But people do find that it does begin to balance out. You do kind of no longer feel the need to have chocolate every night, but you have to kind of go through that to get to that point. But there will be times that, like, we all talk about it, where we have to have a bit of a word with ourselves and go, no, do you know what, the most compassionate thing here is potentially some fruit and yogurt, because I have been wallowing in self-pity or something for a bit too long now, and we'll put the chocolate to the side.
Yeah.
And knowing that that's not restriction, that's not deprivation.
Yeah,
a choice.
exactly. It's an empowered choice. Exactly. I was in the shop with Emma recently, and she just bought like a bag of satsumas, and she was like, do you want a satsuma? And I was like, no thanks. And then I was like, actually yes please. And she was like, wait, what, you just said no? And I was like, do you know what I did in my head? I went, am I hungry for this? And I went, no thanks. And I went, have I had enough fruit and veg today? No. Okay, yes please. And she was like, oh, that's nice to see that in action. And I was like, yes, that's quite cool actually. I've never seen it so obviously play out like that. Interesting. Okay, I'm not sure whose question this is. However, my biggest issue is when I see a group of people I haven't seen for a while and I just can't get off my head that they will say she's put all of that weight back on. I know I have said this about people and often still think it now, even though I hate the thought. What is this all about, and how do I stop A, obsessing about people thinking of it, of me, and B, thinking the same myself of other people, even if it's only in my head?
Spooky, Georgia, that you brought that up earlier.
No.
You literally just said it, yeah.
The thing you were saying about the least noticeable difference, I think that's what you called it.
Oh, where was I this whole time? Yeah.
Wow.
It's only 11 a.m. My goodness.
Yeah, so Georgia's point obviously about like what people actually notice is important. Not that she can remember talking about it, but I'm sure everyone else can. It's really important. I think you've hit the nail on the head, right? It's about your judgment of other people and calling out your judgment of other people. Can you, when you see yourself noticing that you're judging someone, can you call yourself out on it and replace that thought with a compliment about them? I don't mean the way that they look. It might be like their fashion sense, or it might be their energy, it might be something kind that they've said, it might be the way they light up a room when they come in it might be, who knows what it might be, right? But can you actively replace that thought with something else? Because often the more you work on your judgment of others, the more that kind of has an impact on like your fear of judgment of yourself.
Yeah, and I think keeping in mind that your weight is the least interesting thing about you. Nobody, even if you have put on some weight, nobody cares, because they're friends with you for many other reasons that have nothing to do with your weight, size, or shape.
Yeah, and I think just to probably be a little bit harsher on this than maybe you guys have been, is that is probably coming down to a bit of comparison. Like, so what if somebody else has gained some weight or lost some weight? Like, why does that matter to you? Somebody else's body isn't really your business, and you don't know what's gone on to create that change. And I had a conversation with a client recently where she was kind of saying that she's going on a holiday with some friends, and one of them had recently broken off an engagement and had lost a lot of weight since then. And she was mindful that, you know, this friend had usually been a bit larger than her, and now she's going to be a lot smaller than her. And I was like, yeah, but that's a result of absolute heartbreak and restriction and grief. And I was like, this is a very short period of time in this person's life, and their body's going to change again, and you're going to judge them when that changes afterwards and they find themselves and they can eat and enjoy life again. And a lot of time it comes down to kind of comparison and catastrophizing, like, oh, if somebody thinks it's about me, then like, kind of, then what? Like, play that out, then they're nothing. They're still your friend. You're still going to have the same relationship with them, the same love, the same connection between you two. And I think sometimes kind of actually, as a question starts by I can't get out of my head, it is a case of trying to get out of your head a little bit more and kind of being with your friends and being with the people that you're around, you know?
Yeah, I think you're so right. And look at what you're doing day to day in terms of comparison. Are you following Instagram accounts that highlight comparison? Are you like watching people's stories and looking at their lives and their bodies and thinking, like, comparing them to yours? Are you really reading the Daily Mail like sidebar of shame where they're actively encouraging comparison? Like, what are you doing day to day that's encouraging this comparison? Because I don't think I ever really look at women's bodies ever anymore, unless it's like I don't really think I do, like, unless it comes up on a timeline by mistake, or, you know, one of my friends is on holiday or something like that. But then because I don't spend my days looking at that, when I see someone on holiday in a bikini, I'm not looking at their body in a bikini, I'm looking at the beach behind them and like the smile on their face. So can you program yourself and start to train yourself to look at these pictures of people like when they're on holiday and stuff, and look at like the surrounding, like the beauty around them, and like take it, like zooming out from just that body that you see and looking at the entire picture, looking at the joy on the face, looking at the love in their eyes for their partner, whatever it is. Like, can you start to train yourself to look at these other things? then the other thing I would really think about is like, again, internalized weight bias, like, or just weight bias in general. What you're feeling and what you're saying is, you know, people think skinnier is better, people think bigger is worse, and so do I. And that's totally like, this is not a judgment, it's weight bias. It's exacerbated by diet culture and the culture that we live in. And one of the ways to break through that is the awareness of that, and to challenge the narrative of like, do you believe that thinner is more successful? And is that objectively true? And can you find evidence to the contrary of that? Do you believe that leaner means that you're more accepted and more loved? Is that genuinely true? Can you find evidence to the contrary of that? And like reading around blogs and things on internalized weight bias and internalized an ideal and weight stigma, starting to get educated on that, it will help as well. Georgia.
Is it me again? So Becca's client, thoughts on eating frequency. Since I was starting to work on HA recovery, as well as trying to reduce my binge eating, having a meal or snack every 3 to 4 hours has been kind of a non-negotiable for me, even when hunger isn't as obvious. Looking back, I honestly don't understand how I managed to fast for so long between meals. I know that I'm eating intentionally at the moment rather than intuitively, but it's hard for me to imagine another way. It's only when I start honoring my hunger that I realized I've been ignoring it. So to what extent does eating frequency matter for general health, managing disordered eating, and maintaining my cycle? And how important is it that guideline? How important is that guideline relative to overall food intake?
I mean, nailing it at the moment, right? Being so aware that, like you say, the eating at the moment is intentional to help restore your cycle, to help improve your relationship with food. But you hit the nail on the head in that, like, when you fasted, you were ignoring those hunger signals. And I know we spoke about this often, in that when you do eat regularly, that's when your hunger hormones start to like anticipate the next meal. They know like when a meal is coming, so can get going, and you begin to further down the line begin to eat more intuitively. But in terms of kind of what's best for your health and what's best for your relationship with food, I mean, I speak for myself here in that I still eat, I barely overeat anymore, or it's very, very infrequent that I would overeat, but I still know that eating regularly for me is best for my relationship with food. And actually eating regularly for me is good for muscle maintenance and overall health. So because that's something that I value, that's something that I'm going to keep up with moving forwards. And I think being clear on what's going to support you in those things is kind of key to working out what's going to be best for you moving forwards.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think what will happen is that your hunger hormones, like ghrelin, for example, will start to cycle around your regular eating patterns anyway. So over time, you will probably find that you do start to get hungry every 3 hours, 2 to 3 hours, however regular you're eating. That will start to kick in a little bit more. And so it will feel more natural to eat in that pattern, even if it doesn't quite yet. And I totally agree with you, Anna. It's not essential, like in terms of overall health, it's not essential by any means to be eating regularly. It doesn't do anything for your metabolism or anything like that, but it does help with regular protein intake, which is important for health and muscle maintenance and muscle hypertrophy. It also helps in terms of making sure you get a variety of nutrients in, because you've got more opportunities to eat a variety of nutrients. It helps reduce food preoccupation. If you're prone to food preoccupation, it can often help reduce food preoccupation. And if you are prone to HA, it helps reduce what we call within day deficits. So often if you've had HA before, your body seems to, at least in terms of my experience with clients and what we've talked about before with all of our clients, it does seem to be that your body goes into HA or experiences HA quicker the next time potentially that you diet or restrict or get stressed. And I think it's like a self-preservation, kind of knows what's coming situation. And so once you have recovered from HA, you want to make sure that doesn't happen again. And so within day deficits are basically like, if you took a 6-hour period in the morning, even if you were eating 3,000 calories from 3 p.m. till 10 p.m., if you hadn't eaten until 3 p.m., you've still got all of that time that you're technically in a deficit. And I think within day deficits, counted as a 4-hour period, I think, where you're not getting enough energy, and that can have an impact on your cycle. So you really want to be eating regularly for that too. And I do think once you get into the routine of it, like, it feels weird to not be eating. Like you do get naturally hungry, and you are like, oh, it's time for a meal break, and it just becomes much more of a routine.
Yeah, and it might be the case, like the last part of that question is how important is that guideline relative to overall food intake, which I think you've obviously smashed, Emilia. But when you're thinking about kind of moving on from HA recovery, like years down the line, you might still eat quite frequently, but you may like grab an apple, like, or a piece of fruit or a cereal bar, and not feel that you are kind of having to have like these mini meal breaks all the time. It could be your 3 main meals, and your snack might reduce down to like, a piece of fruit loaf or something quick and easy. So your overall energy intake might change, but you may still keep that same kind of structure and frequency going throughout.
I really would love a bit of soaring with butter right now. Just thanks for planting that seed. Might have to go back to the shop and get some.
Do you know, it's even better if you have it with toasted and then put some Biscoff spread on so it melts. It's delicious.
Oh, I've
Highly
never
recommend it.
I like the chew of malt. Like, I like the chew, and I like the chunky, chewy raisins. But I feel like I should try it. Maybe when my taste comes back, I'll try it. Probably wasted right now. And I'll go for it.
Is there a rough amount of time that you would expect to see progress or shifts in behaviours? So this is someone very early in their journey.
It depends how ingrained the behaviour is, really. Some people, week 2, I'll say, okay, we're going to start having a mindful meal every day, and immediately it's there. The thing is that you can change a behaviour with intention and external force or external drive, right? I.e., Anna sets you a habit, and so you start doing that habit, and it's externally driven, and that might take literally a couple of days, and you start doing it every day because you've got that external habit tracker. But over time, and what will take longer, is the internal drive to do it, and the or the intrinsic drive to do it, and the kind of what's the word I'm looking for, the ease of which it becomes natural, and where it becomes a habit that has been developed, rather than a habit that you're doing because you are being guided to do it. And the time that takes depends on how consistent you are day to day, how clearly you can see that that's aligned with your goals, and how clearly your goals are aligned with your values, and how long you've been doing things differently. So the time that it takes can vary, I think, hugely. Unfortunately, there's no kind of, I know there's some statistics around, like, it takes like 28 days to build a habit and things like that, but I don't know enough about the research. But I don't, in terms of all of my experience, I don't see that there's any sort of number specifically that you can give because of all of those reasons. Yeah, sorry, I know it's one question. Just blowing my nose quietly on you.
We good?
Okay, we're good. Sorry. Okay. Becca's question: how do you stop yourself from snacking at work?
This is a good question. I actually did a reel on this the other day, and I think, first of all, I'd say, is it something that you need to stop at the moment, in terms of like, is snacking, is it like picking and grazing constantly, or is it like a planned snack that you're kind of implementing? But checking that, first of all, you're using the hunger scale, and if you're genuinely hungry, do your meals need to be a little bit bigger and a bit more satisfying? Or does your snack need to be a little bit more satisfying? Like, if at the moment you're just having like a handful of grapes, do you need a yogurt and your grapes to kind of fill you up, so that you don't then kind of find yourself in the staff room kind of picking through the biscuit tin and sort of whatever birthday cake is lying around? And then equally, if you're using the hunger scale and you're realizing, okay, this doesn't register in my body anywhere, like I'm not actually physically hungry, but I find myself kind of like staring into the fridge when I'm working from home, or kind of like seeing who's got sweets in their office desk, figuring out what else is kind of happening for you. And I think a lot of the time at work, it's a bit of boredom of like in need of a genuine break. And actually, I think we talked about this last time I was on, like having a cigarette break that's not for cigarettes, like taking yourself away from the screen, having 5 or 10 minutes, grabbing a cup of tea or a quick walk around the block, or maybe treating yourself to a trip to the toilet when you desperately need to pee, instead of kind of like holding it in and doing the last
What a
few
time
emails.
to be alive. What a time to be alive. You just treat yourself in to a wee trip to the toilet.
Treat yourself. Yeah. Do it, enjoy it, make the most of it, you know. Where was I going? Not
Sorry.
cigarettes and going to the toilet. I know. So it's like I start speaking and a goldfish just forget what I'm talking about.
Sorry.
Tag you in, guys. I'll pick up when it comes back.
Sorry, that was so rude of me interrupting. Sorry. My bad.
No, I think you nailed it, Georgia, in identifying, okay, is it a problem? Is it hunger? If it's not hunger, what else is going on? And then, yeah, if it's not hunger, implementing something else that you can just like, yeah, I'm sure there was a thread in the Facebook group on energy snacks and like different ways around food, just to kind of help liven up your afternoon if you hit a bit of a slump.
A lot to be
and
said.
It can be procrastination sometimes as well, can't it? Like you don't want to start something, so it's like, oh, I could eat, that will take up 5 minutes or 10 minutes. And sometimes it's like, actually just
do it.
saying, I'm just going to set this 10-minute timer, do the thing, and then I can breathe and relax and kind of reduce that sort of impending stress that's sort of in the back of your mind as well.
So often now I'm like, I'm eating purely because I don't want to do that bit of boring work. And I know that I call myself on it so many times. I'm like, oh, that's interesting. Okay, well, you can do that, but you have to have a cup of tea instead. I'm like, okay, because there's a lot to be said. Like, we often talk about the deeper stuff, and it's really important, but sometimes it's like, okay, well, you just have to practice some delayed gratification, because we live in a society that's so focused on instant dopamine hits and instant gratification. And actually there's a lot to be said for practicing delayed gratification, setting yourself, okay, well, I'm not going to have it now, but if I still want it in an hour, I'll have it in an hour, in terms of building your resilience and helping you progress towards your goals. And sometimes it is a case of practicing that delayed gratification.
I think that's super important when you work from home, particularly if you're someone who works like from the dining room, or actually like your kitchen table is in the kitchen and you're literally sitting around and all the food's there, and it's so easy to get up and just go and do a quick something and then find yourself at the bottom of a bag of biscuits or kind of whatever it is that you've put in the fridge. So yeah, that does definitely come down to breaking a habit, rather than just figuring out, like, as you said, am I bored? Probably, yes, and surrounded by biscuits. Me?
I don't know.
Roger, go for it. Go for it.
Okay, Denai's client's question. Any suggestions for yummy veggie make ahead or freezer meals? I always need these.
I'm really boring, and it's just, well, it's not, because I absolutely love it, but veggie chili, I think you can't go wrong. Loads of beans, loads of spices, and get like 4 servings out of it. Job done.
What do you use, like beans and pulses, or like corn, or like mince?
Mix it up, don't I? There's always beans in there, but sometimes it'll be I'll add lentils, and sometimes it'll be I don't actually like corn mince. It doesn't do anything for me, but the Tesco own veggie mince is very nice.
Oh, good to know. I might try that one.
And I think it's like 5 gram more protein than corn in a serving. So
oh wow. Have you seen Beyond Meat do the Beyond Burgers? They've started doing Beyond Meat mince as well, so you can kind of mix that up. It is a bit higher in fat, but it's very, very tasty.
I feel like that would remind me too much of meat. Like, I've never really eaten in my life like mince meat or anything like that, because I was veggie growing up, so I've never really had that type of meat, and I get the idea of it kind of gives me the heebie-jeebies a little bit. but that's personal preference. I know the burgers are
Too
delicious.
close.
Yeah. What did I do recently? I recently made like a batch cook of just the beetroot and red lentil pasta, and I just batch cooked that and then made a big like tomatoey sauce thing with tons of just every vegetable I could find, and tinned tomatoes and spices, and then I just had that. I actually had that like 4 days in a row. Like, you could obviously freeze it, but I do quite like eating the same thing for a couple of days and then eating something else. It works for me, especially as a single person. Well, as a person living on my own, it's like you don't want to waste like food. So I do, and I don't really love eating out of the freezer. Like, I mean, I like freezer food, but I don't really love prepping meals and putting them in the freezer and taking them out. It reminds me too much of prep, and it kind of gives me the creeps. Although, of course, it's a fantastic way of doing things if you haven't got PTSD from the times that you used to, freeze and then re-eat it. So I like doing that. To be honest, again, I'm not a big bulk cooker. I honestly don't think that meals in general, unless you're making things like cottage pie or lasagna or chili or things like that, I don't really think that often they need to be prepped that much. I often will just literally just put vegetables in a pan. At the moment, I'm on corn sausages, although the protein intake's not great, but I'll just microwave corn sausages and put them in the stir fry pan with vegetables, and then it's done, and it takes 5 minutes. So I'm not a big prepper, which is probably useless, which is why I often will say, well, if you Google like veggie meal prep, but then again, I think they often overcomplicate it.
Mm-hmm. I would say my favorite style of cooking, and I'm going to say it's a style to make me feel better, is like a 1 tray meal. So oven is on, I can put all my stuff onto this 1 tray for the same amount of time, leave it while I go and do whatever, like have a shower or finish some emails, come back and it's ready. And this is where some frozen stuff comes in really handy, because like in Tesco or Aldi or Lidl, you can get frozen butternut squash. All you do is defrost it in the microwave first, put the herbs and spices and a bit of oil on, put some red onion in, whatever of the mushrooms, peppers, whatever veggies you really like, and then Linda McCartney frozen sausages, in they go. Literally just shove it in the oven, come back to it, and then I have it cupboard stocked full of like those microwave grain pouches. So there's a different kind of grain, or maybe it's like lentils or a mixture of things, and yeah, that's in the microwave for like 2 minutes. So it's about 25 minutes in total, and most of that you can spend away while the oven kind of like does its own thing. But I actually have a really good cookbook, and I'm now going to forget what it's called, of course, goldfish memory today. It's something like the green veg tray, or the 1 tray green veg cookbook. Put any of those words into Google and it'll come up. And it is literally, I know, it's perfect, but it's all vegetarian meals, and it is just like shove it all on 1 tray, wave goodbye, come back, and it's done. And I find that really handy because you've got very limited washing up afterwards as well. And if you are making it for a family or for 2 or 3 people, it's very easy just to kind of like make it a larger baking tray or a smaller baking tray if it's just you. So yeah, love.
I think we need a discount code for those veggie bags. I think we must have sold 1 million of those microwave pulses bags by now. Surely.
I think so. To be affiliated with grains and veggies.
Yeah. Did I tell you that Love Honey emailed me about being an ambassador multiple times? Did I say that? It's finally happened.
I didn't know it was multiple.
Yes.
No, I don't do ambassadorships, do I? Finally got my dream, and I know that they'll blanket email. I know it's not just directly towards me. However, it was like a 2020 dream come true, to be honest, or maybe even longer. But I didn't reply. I should have said thanks so much, but I didn't. I just sat on it and thought, gosh, my time has come.
You didn't want an ETPHD sex line, like as a side business. I don't mean sex line as in like toy. I meant as in like sex toys line.
I don't know, my voice is quite husky and sexy right now. It could work. Yeah, I mean, why not? I feel like, untapped market. Improve your body image with this clitoral stimulation tool. Clitoral, not sure how you pronounce that word, which is concerning in itself.
Clitoral, yeah.
Clitoral.
But you have to go a bit deeper, like Radio 4 voice, like, welcome to ETPHD sex line. How can I help you?
Oh, you've got the best voice for it. You've got the best voice for it. You could
Did you get the job?
You
Oh my
got the
God.
job. Yeah.
Thank
I'll
you.
just be the tester. And then that's fine.
You can do the reviews. I'll announce them and you do the reviews.
Ideal. Okay, Anna, question.
On that note, what are your favorite things to self-soothe / create more emotional regulation?
Well,
That's fine.
masturbation. Masturbation is great because you do get like a neurotransmitter release. Like you do get a dopamine hit from masturbation, serotonin, etc., oxytocin. Like it's fantastic in the moment and just day to day. Well, maybe not day to day. Well, if you want. I like masturbation, don't we all? I like to I like incense. I feel like I've said this a million times. I like yoga, I like meditation, I like breath work, I like getting out in nature, I like a candle, I like incense, I like comfortable clothes, a hot water bottle, a hot drink. I think that's it.
I think you've pretty much covered everything. I like being outdoors, like long term and short term. So like getting out daily helps me overall, but also if it's in the moment and I am having intense emotions and it's just like I don't know what to do with them, which sometimes happens. Like I can at times stand in the middle of the room not making any decision, not knowing what to do, and just kind of being like that's when I'm like, go for a walk, Georgia. And even if it's just 10 minutes, then I'm kind of like, oh, okay, right now I can sort myself out, sort my life out, and kind of deal with whatever's going on. But I also love a bath as well. I don't live in a place with a bath right now, and I sorely miss it. But yeah, bubble bath, reading my book, like half an hour of just no technology, being warm and cozy, and getting lost in a really fun story for me is like a really nice way of kind of switching off from everything. Those would be my go-tos, I think.
I think in the moment I would add butterfly taps. I haven't done that for a while and I love them. There's just like ultimate comfort in hugging yourself, and like the tapping just helps you come back to the moment. And a really familiar TV program. Again, this is anxiety coming out, but just it's always Friends for me, because you know exactly what's coming and there's something really comforting about that.
Totally agree. Friends is one of the most comforting TV programs ever, or like the most comforting things ever, to be honest, because there's so many reassuring things about it. Like, you know what's coming, it feels certain, it's funny, it normalizes so much of life. It's very focused on like common humanity. It's kind, I mean, it's obviously problematic in a lot of ways, but when you can look beneath the surface of that stuff, it just ticks all the boxes, isn't it?
Me and my mum share a Netflix account, and if she ever comes on and it's like, oh, Friends is like one of like continue watching Friends, she's like, are you okay, Anna? I'm like, yeah, fine now.
That's your call for help.
yeah.
I never got into Friends. Like back in the 90s at school, everyone was like, oh my God, it's this season. And I was just like, oh, okay. And I've tried watching it and it doesn't do it for me. My sister loves it and she'll have it on and I can literally talk through the whole thing or watch it and not even laugh. I'm just like, oh, okay. It just never did it for me. Like my comfort TV shows are things like Brooklyn Nine-Nine or like I don't know, things like South Park, like things that make me laugh that are kind of, again, predictable. I've watched them a million times, but yeah, it was never Friends. Sorry.
Gone down on my expectations. I hate South Park.
I know. I'll keep that to myself in future.
Okay. Me, I think. Rosalind's question. Is it possible that I have chronic constipation as I feel I've done all I can? ? I take 4 Senokot nightly, fibre is 25 grams per day. I drink 1 to 1.5 litres of water and 4 cups of tea, coffee daily. I have a BM in the morning but feel very heavy and constipated by the evening. I think that maybe means like I have a bowel movement in the morning, but feel very heavy, constipated by the evening. Sorry, it took me a little bit longer than it took you guys, obviously, to get there. Apologies.
I think that's like quite a common American term, like this ABM, whereas we'll just say toilet or poop.
I'm for crap. If you're Scottish. A
jobby.
Oh, jobby is such a gross word. I mean, I would say if you're taking laxatives daily, is something that you're working with Roz, who is a specialist in gut health, right? So she will be talking to you about, like, if anyone is listening, taking laxatives daily, that's something you need to speak to your doctor about, or a dietitian, and that's what you're doing with Roz. So I'm not going to kind of step on toes in that sense, but fiber is still relatively low, 25 grams a day. I would be looking more towards like a minimum of 30 grams, and if you're constipated, more. 1.5 liters of water a day, I would still say you could increase that to at least 2 liters a day, 2.5 liters a day. I would say stress is such an underrated cause of digestive issues. We often go to food first, and sometimes it is food, but often it's stress. So really working on things that reduce your sympathetic dominance, because your digestive system is predominantly controlled by the parasympathetic nervous system. So rest and digest. So if you're spending a lot of time in fight or flight, your digestion potentially is off. And so that's one of the potential reasons. So I would really work on that, mindfulness, etc. Mindfulness around meals, stress management day to day, but also around meals. I would look at your calorie intake, which again, I'm sure in some capacity you're doing with Roz, whether it be calorie counting or more like looking at your nutritional choices day to day, because often if you're not eating enough, then you'll have signs of constipation. But also body image, you do get heavier and bigger by the end of the day in general, and bloated by the end of the day in general. And I don't want to normalize constipation and pain, but often we think that we've got an issue with our digestion, and actually it's just general like digestion and like natural bloating from the foods that we're having. And especially if you're having foods that are like high in FODMAPs, or maybe a lot of artificial sweeteners, combined with stress, these things can all combine. Okay, let's do one more question. Georgia.
Okay, this is Janai's client. There's 2 in here, so I'm going to break them down because they're quite separate. So we'll just do the first one. What are the go-to strengths for beating down years of disordered eating? Is there a strategy?
Strengths. All of the work that you'll do with Janai really are the ways to, like, disordered eating is so vague, in the sense of disordered eating could look like binge eating, it could look like overeating, it could look like restriction, it could look like good and bad foods, kind of all or nothing thinking, yo-yo dieting, chronic dieting. There are so many manifestations of a disordered relationship with food. So really, I think the key is identifying what it is and identifying the purpose of it. That is kind of number one fundamental thing that you have to do. And a lot of the nutritional strategies we put in place are important for regularity and nutrient intake, etc. But they are kind of managing the symptom, and then really it's about looking at where this drive for disordered eating has come from, or what purpose these dysfunctional habits are serving, and then managing that, like managing things around that.
I was thinking like strengths as in like no, personality, that's not what the word I'm looking for, but like strengths as in like openness and honesty with Janai, because ultimately that's going to help you work through this process. But also I think building resilience as well, because there are going to be challenging days, and rather than, like, obviously this is where all the self-compassion work comes in, rather than seeing like a failure, seeing them as a learning opportunity so you can keep moving forwards.
Yeah, that's a great shout, actually. That probably is what the question meant.
No. I mean, everything you said was spot on, but I was like, oh, I'm just going down a different route. It's okay.
Yeah, I think you're right. And vulnerability with yourself, with Danae, courage to do something different, to lean into the discomfort of what will feel uncomfortable sometimes. Acceptance of things that you've done, and forgiveness of things that have been done in the past that you feel that like they were the right decisions for you at that time, and not being self-critical is really important. Coming from with a compassionate mind towards yourself and to the process, all essentials. Okay, thanks everyone for your questions. Keep them coming in. Thank you both so much. Bye.
Bye.